Elaine Kitchell. I wanted to talk to you today and just give you a brief introduction to some things. The first thing I'd like to give you an introduction to is me. My background is in education, secondary education, special education, and also botany. And I've worked part of my life on each of those. And the last portion of my career I've spent working on products for blind people. It was a lot of fun. I was a research scientist, and I would study where the blind people are, and there are clusters of them in various parts of the country, and what they needed, and then would develop stuff, curricula, but even fun stuff like video games. I know blind people in video games, but most people who are considered blind have some vision, and it's called residual vision. And almost everybody has some light perception or some shadow perception, things they can work with. And so we also made video games that were completely based on audio. So it was great fun, and I worked there 20 years, and I made just everything you could think of that a blind person might need. Video games were some of the more fun projects. I made an atlas, and I made all kinds of kits that teachers need to teach blind kids and visually impaired kids. And it was very rewarding, and I'm glad I did it. During that time, I learned a lot. I already knew a lot about vision because I'd gone to college and all that, but I really learned the practical side of it and how to apply things that I had learned. I'm getting interested in the vision of underwater inhabitants like fish and seals and other animals that spend a great deal of their time in the water, otters and crabs and you name it. And because I learned while I was working as a research scientist that our vision over the years is deteriorating. It's deteriorating actually over eons of time. I think we probably used to be able to see ultraviolet. I think early man probably could see ultraviolet or maybe infrared. But now we can't see that any longer. And we're getting where we can't see regular violet as well. Our atmosphere is far thinner than it used to be when the Earth was developing. And so it lets in a lot more ultraviolet and blue light than it used to. And people my age, almost everybody my age, has some very serious death of their retinal cells. The cells that are dying are the photoreceptors. Everybody has retinas. I think you all know what a retina is. It's, if you think of your eye as a ball, on the outside is this tough covering called a sclera, and inside is another covering called the choroid layer, and then there's another layer called the retina. And this is the part that sees. These are actually little nerve endings that transmit light to your brain, and your brain takes those impulses from the light and actually figures out what they're saying to you and interprets that as vision. So since people are losing their ability to see earlier and earlier because of several things, one thing is, of course, there's more light coming through the atmosphere from the sun, but there's also a lot that we do to our own environments that make them very unfriendly to our eyes. And one of the things that our environments do to make one of the things that we do to our environment to make it unhealthy for our eyes is we pump a lot of blue and ultraviolet light in the form of lamps that we use every day. Now, in the lighting industry, anything that glows and lights up is called a lamp. Even if it's just a teeny tiny LED or a fluorescent tube or a light bulb, it's all called a lamp. So I'm using lamps in that way. I'm not talking about the decorator item that sits on your coffee table, although that too is a lamp, but that's called a decorator lamp. And anything that glows, that electricity is passing through, we call a lamp. So we have introduced thousands upon millions of lamps into our environments that put out a lot more ultraviolet and blue than even the sun. If you light your home with a 6700 Kelvin tube, which is a regular daylight tube, we're introducing way more blue and ultraviolet than you would get from the sun at noon if you stood outside. Why do we do that? Well, it all has to do with the lighting industry. The lighting industry came up with these highly intense bluish lights, which they call cool white and daylight and full spectrum, and they introduced those, and they were more expensive, so they started pushing those everywhere, and so people adopted those and put themselves in environments that really cause a lot of stress for your body. Physiologically, when you're in a blue room, which is reflecting blue light, or if you're in any color of room where the lamps are blue light, and it doesn't have to look blue, it just has to be in a range where there's a lot of blue coming from the lamp that you don't necessarily interpret as blue with your eye, but it's there, then you are really dosing your eye and your body to a high level of unfriendly waves. Now, how do these unfriendly waves affect us? Well, there are several ways they affect us. First of all is they interfere with our wake-sleep cycle, and for many people who have trouble sleeping, it's because they spend their days all day under cool white or full spectrum or daylight fluorescent lights or LEDs of the same type and get their circadian rhythms all mixed up. Another thing we do when we introduce that kind of light is that we jack up our need for carbohydrates. And if you notice yourself running to the candy machine at work or the coffee machine and getting yourself something to drink and to eat, and it's full of sugar, you can almost always figure that that's because you have taken yourself a good big dose of blue light during the day. Now, blue light doesn't just affect our retina, it affects our whole physiology. And we know this because people have studied it. Several years ago, I think it was 1979, the University of Mississippi studied prisoners. And they took prisoners and they put them in white rooms and gray rooms, and they dosed them with just your regular old fluorescent cool white tubes and fluorescent, I don't think daylight tubes were out yet, but they did have fluorescent tubes that had a higher range of ultraviolet in them than we do now. And everybody thinks blue is calming, folks, but it isn't. It calmed them for about the first 15 minutes, but then after that they just went bonkers. A great many of these prisoners were unable to stay calm. They became aggressive. They fought with one another. They did self-harm. They did things to themselves and showed symptoms of needing carbohydrates and needing soothing. And this was because of the blue light. We know that because after they did that part of the test, they then subjected the same prisoners and other new prisoners to rooms that were painted different colors, and they used different colors of light, and they found that pink was the most soothing. So they started painting all kinds of jail cells and prisons with a color called Baker Miller pink, which is kind of a salmon pink. And they found that over time, people were not able to maintain aggression or to maintain anger and maintain, a high level of feeling stressed out in the presence of Baker Miller pink. So now, a whole lot of penal institutions and psychiatrists' office are painted in Baker Miller pink for that reason. So people think that the ocean is soothing, and they think that blue is soothing because they associate it with the ocean. But blue is not soothing to your system physiologically. Blue really stresses your system. So to get back to the other things that blue light does to you, is besides sleeping, interrupting your sleep cycle and causing you to crave carbohydrates, another thing that it does is that it interferes with your, the attraction mating cycle. And that's also dictated by how much blue light you get. You also have interruptions in your digestive cycle and interruptions in your fright and flee response. All these are slowed way down when you are subjected to long periods under your basic cool white light. And those lights are everywhere. Those lights light up Walmart, Kmart, Home Depot, everything. All of our industry is pretty much lit, and our commerce is lit by cool white fluorescent tubes and other tubes which have high levels of blue light in them. So what do? We are the recipients of these high doses of blue light, and sometimes it's against our will. What do? Well, you can wear pink glasses everywhere you go. That will change your physiological responses. You cannot go to those places that have the high doses of blue light and ultraviolet light. Or you can join me and push for people to change the way they think about our lighted environment. We need to stop buying the argument from the lighting companies that this is all good for us. It's not good for us. Physiological studies of primates and lots of other animals, and of course people too, show that this is not good for us and that it does these harmful things to us. And we need to fight back and tell the lighting industry, we're not going to buy these. We are not going to buy these. I know of a school in Kentucky that got a grant from the Kentucky state government to redo all the lighting in their school. Now, this is a school that's from kindergarten through grade 12. And they went in there because they bought this argument from the lighting industry that these daylight tubes were so great, and they lit the entire school with daylight tubes. Well, after a while, about 6 months of being subjected to that, the teachers were complaining, the students were complaining, everyone was getting headaches. everyone was feeling listless, everyone was having sugar attacks, or hypoglycemia is actually what it is. And they wanted a change. Who did they call? Yours truly. Yes, they did. To call me to come in there and make the changes that were necessary. And when I told the governing body of the school, you know, the principal and the superintendent and all those people, what was needed, they said, well, why didn't the lighting people know this? The people that sold us these lights. Well, honey, they're not going to tell you because they make a lot more money from selling you a daylight tube than they do a soft white tube. Now, the opposite of a cool white tube is a soft white tube. The cool white tube puts out lots of blue and ultraviolet, while the warm white tube puts out very little ultraviolet and blue and puts out a predominance of red light. Does it look red when you look at it? No. Does it look red when it bounces off your walls? No. It has a faint pinkish glow, just like the cool white has a faint bluish glow. But you have to look hard to recognize it. Nevertheless, people are not told that you can get the warm white at the same cost or cheaper than the cool white, or the daylight white, which costs even more, or the full spectrum, which costs even more. You know what you get when you get a full spectrum light? Full spectrum wants you to think that it's the same friendly rays given out by the sun. And technically, it is. It's exactly the same rays given out by the sun, but they're in different proportions. The sun gives out technically and absolutely far less blue and ultraviolet than it does green. It has a huge spike in the green part of the spectrum and a large spike in the red part of the spectrum, and very short little spikes in the blue and ultraviolet. That's what we get from the sun. But what does a full spectrum light give you, or lamp give you? It gives you big tall spikes in the blue and ultraviolet range, sort of a medium spike in the green range, and a very short spike, a very short spike in the red range. So, what do we do with that information? We learn the lighting code on the sides of the tubes and lights that we're going to purchase. We learn how to read that thing, and we purchase the ones that are healthy for us. Let me tell you, here's the scariest thing about blue and ultraviolet lights, is that they cause your retina to stop making a enzyme called cytochrome oxidase. And when there's not enough cytochrome oxidase in your retina, you can't transmit oxygen to your retinal cells. And the cells begin to die after 4 minutes of exposure to blue and ultraviolet light. That's what's scary, folks. And we are living with those lights in our environment in huge abundance every day. Every single day. What's wrong with us? People are going blind because of these things. You don't notice it at first. It's a very slow process. You have millions of photoreceptor cells on your retina that are shutting down, but they just do it a few at a time. But once it's gone, it's gone. You can't grow back new retinal cells the way you can grow back liver cells or skin cells. No, once they're gone, they're gone. You deprive them of cytochrome oxidase when you function under those lights, and once your cytochrome oxidase is gone, there goes the oxygen to your retinal cells. Now, I think that's scary. I myself have a macular disease, and I don't know how much was contributed by ultraviolet and blue light, because I'm a child of the 60s, and in the 60s, people of my generation, we sat under black lights all the time. Yes, we would smoke a doobie, we would sit under black light, we would look at our big black light posters, and chill out. And the blue light part of that just isn't good for us. Now you can argue whether the doobie part of that is good for us as well. I'm not going to argue with you about that. But we definitely know that exposure to all those black lights during the 60s definitely had an effect on the vision of people my age, because people my age now are starting to finally notice the huge patches of retinal cells that are dead on their retina. And when that occurs, what you see is just you have little holes in your vision, little black spots. My vision is like looking through the lid of the salt shaker. Okay, I have good vision in parts, and I have parts where it's completely missing. Now I do have a retinal disease, but my eyes might not be so bad if I had not sat under all those black lights when I was going to college. So there's an argument to be made for that. I plead with you, if you want to save your retinas, do not buy cool white lights for your home. Do not buy cool white LEDs for your home. Do not buy daylight. Do not buy full spectrum. These things are all words for lights which are harmful to your retina. The thing you want to have in your home is either lights that put out light in the yellow range or lights that put out light in the red range. Now let me explain something. There are only 3 colors of light. There's blue light, green light, and red light. I know you think there's a lot more than that because you can see 16 million colors, at least. Well, your brain, where colors overlap, where I'm getting red rays overlapping with green rays, I see yellow, and so do you. The brain interprets that as yellow. All vision is just interpretation by the brain of wavelengths of light. That's all it is. And where you see some blue overlapping with green, yes, you'll see turquoise. That one makes sense, doesn't it? But different wavelengths in different amounts under different conditions determine what colors you see. So it's very simple to buy a light that puts out both green and red rays at the same time and lights your home with a nice yellow or amber glow. It's very easy to buy a light that puts out mostly waves in the red wavelength, also called warm white, and puts out a nice rosy glow. We know from experiments, and some of these experiments I've done myself, that people who spend most of their time under warm white light, that is light that's mostly in the red range, do not get the 3 o'clock hypoglycemia. They don't get disruption of their wake cycle, their sex cycle, their digestive cycle, their flight response cycle, all of those things. There's about 20 things that are governed by this. And everything goes way more smoothly when your environment is lit with rays out of the red range of the visible spectrum. There's a lot more to this, and I'll talk to you about it more, but I wanted to just give you that opening so that when the discussions get a little bit more complex, that you'll have a good sense of what the background is, so that you're not floundering trying to understand what's going on. Now, for you fish people, I want to say that this is very important when it comes to lighting your tank. A lot of fish have eyes on the tops of their heads, like rays, manta rays, and stingrays, and their eyes are affected differently because their exposure is so much greater. So I'm studying that right now. I'm studying how fish are and their eyes are affected by different wavelengths of light. This is something I've not studied before, and I'm learning a lot. Let me just say, right now, all I know is that their eyes are affected by different wavelengths of light. I don't know quite what the symptoms are yet and how serious it is. So I'm going to study that for you, and I'm going to make a presentation for you that will discuss that with you. Because I think that through technology we can arrive at a way that we can light our tanks for our fish and light our tanks for our plants and have everybody be happy. It may take a little experimentation, and I may call on a few of you to help me to experiment with that. But let's just see where that takes us, and I'm going to try to have that video out for you in July of this year, which means I've got to really study while I'm on my vacation in June. But I want to do that. I'm very interested in this, and I know that you fish people are very interested in making your tanks more habitable for your fish and the creatures that you want to save from extinction. So I want to thank you for watching. I want to thank you for caring about your lighted environment for both you and your fish. And I want to say good night. That's all, folks.